everyone, my name is Miss Velvet, and today I would like to share with you about a type of writer's technique, and that is the use of sentence structure, particularly long sentences. As you study English at secondary level, you will come to realize that the comprehension passage you are studying is much more difficult. The questions are much harder too. This is because many of the questions in a narrative compre text require you to answer language for impact type of questions. What you are essentially doing is examine the use of language and its effects. What did the writer want you to think with his or her choice of words? What is the writer trying to hint at even though he or she did not explicitly state something? As such, it would be good to pay some attention to the different techniques used in writing. Today, we're going to look at how writers use long sentences to convey meaning in writing. Sentence structure refers to the way words are organized grammatically to form a sentence. Sometimes, writers use extremely long, complex sentences. Other times, they use really short and simple ones. Sometimes, they may not even complete their sentences. With long sentences, you may even notice more extensive details added by the writer. Have you ever thought about why long sentences are deliberately used? After all, we usually advise students to write in a clear and concise manner, especially with sentences that are not too long. If the writer is using long sentences, it could be because the narrator is contemplating because he or she is sharing his or her thoughts with you. The narrator is using extensive details to envision the setting the character finds himself or herself in. The narrator is being vivid to show the emotion the character might be feeling. In order to better understand a writer's choice of using long sentences in his work, it might be useful to know the time period that the book was set in. Let me share with you an example. Charles Dickens, a famous Victorian writer, loved using long, complex sentences. Here is an extract taken from one of his classics, Great Expectations. At such a time, I found out for certain that this bleak place overgrown with nettles was the churchyard, and that Philip Pirrip, late of this parish, and also Georgiana, wife of the above, were dead and buried, and that Alexander, Bartholomew, Abraham, Tobias, and Roger, infant children of the aforesaid, were also dead and buried, and that the dark, flat wilderness beyond the churchyard, intersected with dikes and mounds and gates, with scattered cattle feeding on it, was the marshes, and that the low leaden line beyond was the river, and that the distant savage lair from which the wind was rushing was the sea, and that the small bundle of shivers, growing afraid of it all and beginning to cry, was Pip. I don't know if you noticed, but this is one sentence. Imagine reading the book. Now, it would be easy to assume that his intention is to overwhelm the reader's senses. However, that is actually not the case. In fact, this is specifically his style of writing. Some would even argue that this is a standard for writers of his era. Dickens wanted to display the reality of his era in all of its details, so his words often include vivid descriptions of people and places. In the previous example, Dickens has clearly painted a bleak and dreary landscape. Pip, the orphan and main character, had been born into it. The use of a long and complex sentence to convey these details evoke a kind of tension in the reader who is made aware that Pip would not have an easy life in these conditions. Now, compare this to an extract written by a popular writer. The following sentence is from Paper Towns by John Green. So, when I woke up, I had a long conversation with my mom about the cycle of life and how death is part of life, but not a part of life I needed to be particularly concerned about at the age of 9, and I felt better. Can you tell how old the narrator is? That's right, he's 9 years old. Why is a 9-year-old speaking in such a long sentence? Well, it's because many 9-year-olds tend to speak in particularly long sentences. especially when they are sharing about a topic which they may not particularly like or be interested in to get it over with. In this instance, the narrator is sharing a conversation he had with his mother about death. It's a topic which the 9-year-old narrator is shaken by due to earlier events in the story. The writer is trying to show how a typical 9-year-old would go about relating this uncomfortable conversation to another person in one long breath to summarize an event so that he or she will not need to talk more about it. Did you find it a little funny? I know I did, because I can imagine a little 9-year-old in front of me telling me all of these in one breath so that I will not ask him or her more questions about it. Try observing the younger kids around you next time when they are in such a similar situation. You will see that John Green has captured this characteristic of younger kids by choosing to write in one long sentence. All in all, we ought to pay attention to the writer's styles as we read different books. When reading, we can pause at certain moments to consider the impact of the language on us. Sometimes there are new ideas. Other times, we consider the effects of the sentence length. We can see how the use of long sentences is a choice by writers. This is to achieve their purpose to tell readers more about the setting or the characters. Well, I hope that you have learned something new today. Have a good week ahead!